My parents erased me for refusing to act as a puppet in their corrupt empire. For 5 years, I lived like a ghost under a Chicago bridge while they dined on caviar. But they made a fatal mistake, leaving my little sister behind. When she handed me a check for $3 million, my parents suddenly reappeared. They think I am a sheep, unaware that the streets turned me into a wolf ready to destroy them. My name is Anthony Jones, and the only thing I owned in this world was the freezing marrow in my bones and a dying notebook pressed against my chest. I was 32 years old, though, if you looked at the hollowed-out shell of a man reflected in the dirty puddles of Lower Wacker Drive, you would have sworn I was 60. Chicago in February does not forgive. It does not bargain. The wind, which the locals call the hawk, does not just blow. It hunts. It screams down the concrete canyons of the city, searching for the weak, the broken, and the forgotten, tearing through layers of cardboard and newspaper, as if they were nothing more than tissue. Tonight, the temperature had dropped to 12 degrees below zero, a number that ceases to be a meteorological statistic and becomes a death sentence for people like me. I pulled my knees tighter to my chest, trying to preserve a pocket of warmth in the core of my body. My coat, a patchwork of 3 different jackets I had scavenged from dumpsters over the last 1,800 days, was stiff with frozen grime. I could feel the concrete of the bridge abutment leaching the heat from my spine, a slow, parasitic drain that made my teeth chatter in a rhythm I could no longer control. This was the bottom, the absolute floor of existence. Above me, the city of Chicago roared on. I could hear the muffled thrum of tires on the upper deck of Wacker Drive, the distant sirens wailing like lost souls, and the heavy, rhythmic bass of music from cars passing by. Cars filled with people who had heaters, people who had destinations, people who had names that mattered. Down here in the underbelly of the city, we were just shadows. The darkness of Lower Wacker is perpetual, a gloom that smells of exhaust fumes, stale urine, and the damp rot of the Chicago River nearby. It is strange what the mind clings to when the body is failing. As the shivering became violent, racking my ribcage, my mind drifted back unbidden to the life I had before the fall. It seemed like a hallucination now. I had been an architect of the digital world. I had been a software engineer with a corner office and a mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. I saw code like music. I could weave algorithms that predicted market trends, that optimized logistics, that secured billion-dollar transactions. I was the prodigy of the Harrington dynasty, the golden boy who was supposed to inherit the kingdom. But I was not Anthony Harrington anymore. That man died 5 years ago. He died the day he refused to sign off on a fraudulent security protocol that would have compromised the private data of millions of users to inflate the family stock price. He died the day his own parents, the illustrious titans of industry, planted 3 ounces of cocaine in his apartment and falsified psychiatric evaluations to have him declared mentally incompetent. They stripped me of my name, my assets, and my credibility. They threw me to the wolves, expecting me to be devoured. I looked down at my hands. They were cracked, the skin split open by the dry cold, the fingernails black with dirt. But beneath the filth, they were still the hands that had written the Sentinel Code, a predictive algorithm that was currently making my parents millions of dollars a year in licensing fees. I shifted my position, wincing, as the circulation tried to return to my numb legs. I reached into the innermost pocket of my coat and pulled out the notebook. It was a moleskin, or it had been once. Now, the cover was peeling, held together by duct tape and hope. The pages were warped from humidity, but the ink was still legible. This notebook was my sanity. Every day for 5 years, while I begged for quarters or scavenged for half-eaten sandwiches in the trash cans behind high-end delis, I kept my mind sharp by coding on paper. I wrote updates to my old software. I designed new architectures for decentralized banking. I solved complex mathematical proofs in the margins. I wrote it all down in a shorthand only I could understand. If I stopped writing, if I stopped thinking, the cold would win. The notebook was the only proof that Anthony Jones was still in there, trapped inside the body of a beggar. It was my dignity. A sudden blast of wind whipped through the underpass, carrying with it a spray of icy slush. I curled around the notebook, shielding it with my body. A cough ripped through my lungs, a wet, rattling sound that tasted like copper. I was sick. I had been sick for weeks, a fever burning low and steady against the freeze. I knew with the calm clarity of someone who has stared into the abyss for too long that I might not survive the night. Then the light changed. Usually, the headlights in Lower Wacker are a sickly yellow or a harsh, blinding white that passes quickly, eager to escape the gloom. But these lights were different. They were precision-engineered beams cutting through the darkness with an arrogant stability. The sound of the engine was different too, not the rattle of a delivery truck or the whine of a taxi, but a deep, powerful purr like a sleeping beast. I squinted through my matted hair. A car had stopped. It was not just a car. It was a rolling fortress of wealth, a Rolls-Royce Phantom painted a black so deep it seemed to absorb the shadows around it. The spirit of ecstasy on the hood gleamed under the flickering sodium lights of the tunnel, a silver angel mocking our hell. It had pulled up right next to the cardboard encampment where I and 3 others were huddled. The contrast was so violent it felt offensive. The car alone cost more than every person in this tunnel would earn in 100 lifetimes. I felt a surge of bitterness. Was this some rich kid lost on a joyride? Or perhaps a drug deal going down? In Lower Wacker, a car like that usually meant trouble. My neighbor, an old veteran named Silas, who had lost his legs to diabetes, grunted in his sleep but didn't wake. I tensed, shoving the notebook back into my coat. If they were here to cause trouble, I was too weak to fight, but I would not let them take my book. The rear door of the Phantom opened. The interior light spilled out warm and golden, revealing cream-colored leather seats that looked softer than clouds. A pair of black boots stepped onto the slush-covered pavement. They were expensive boots, leather, polished to a shine that reflected the grim surroundings. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in a long camel hair coat that looked impossibly warm. A cashmere scarf was wrapped around her neck. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine shoot, completely out of place in the damp, freezing reek of the underpass. She stood there for a moment, the wind whipping her dark hair across her face. I shrank back into the shadows, pulling my hood lower. I did not want to be seen. I did not want to be an object of pity or disgust. I just wanted to disappear. Anthony, the voice was barely a whisper carried away by the wind, but it hit me harder than a physical blow. It was a voice from a lifetime ago, a voice I hadn't heard since it was the high-pitched giggle of a teenager asking for help with her chemistry homework. I stopped breathing. It wasn't possible. The hypothermia must have finally reached my brain. I was hallucinating. "Anthony!" she called again, louder this time. Her voice cracked. She began to walk toward the huddled shapes against the wall, scanning us with desperate eyes. I tried to make myself smaller, but she had already seen me. Or rather, she had seen the eyes. My mother always said I had my grandfather's eyes. Gray, sharp, unmistakable. Even after 5 years of hell, the eyes were the same. She stopped 3 feet away from me. It was Bella, my little sister. She was 24 now, no longer the teenager I remembered. She held herself with the posture of a CEO, a woman used to commanding rooms. But right now, that command is crumbling. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, not from the cold, but from shock. She was looking at the rags, the dirt, the sores on my face, the absolute ruin of her brother. "Go away," I croaked. My voice was a ruined gravel pit, unused to speaking more than a few words at a time. "You have the wrong person." "No," she whispered. Tears instantly welled in her eyes, hot and fast, spilling over her cheeks. "No, I don't." "Bella, please," I rasped, panic rising in my chest. I looked at myself, filthy smelling of unwashed misery. I looked at her, pristine, successful. I was a stain on her reality. "Get back in the car. It's not safe here. I'm not him." She didn't listen. She didn't care about the grime. She didn't care about the smell that would make most people gag. She crossed the remaining distance in 2 strides and dropped to her knees on the frozen, urine-stained concrete. "Anthony!" She cried out, a sound of pure heartbreak, and threw her arms around me. I froze. I was terrified to touch her. My hands were covered in the filth of the city. I held them up away from her expensive coat, trying to push her away with my elbows. "Bella, stop! I'm dirty. You'll ruin your clothes. I'm sick." "I don't care," she sobbed, burying her face in my shoulder, clinging to me, as if I were a life raft in the ocean. "I don't care about the clothes. I found you. Oh my God, I finally found you." The warmth of her body was shocking. It radiated through the layers of my frozen rags, a heat that felt almost painful against my numb skin. I felt her shaking her sobs, racking her small frame against my chest. And slowly, the resistance drained out of me. The wall I had built around my heart, the fortress of indifference I needed to survive, shattered. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, slowly came down and rested on her back. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. I thought everyone forgot," I whispered, my voice breaking. Bella pulled back slightly, her hands gripping my face. Her palms were warm and soft, her thumbs wiping away the grime on my cheekbones. Her eyes, fierce and red-rimmed, locked onto mine. "I never forgot," she said fiercely. "Not for 1 second. I spent every bonus, every dividend check, every dollar I made hiring private investigators. We went through 7 different firms. They told me you were dead. They told me to give up. Mom and Dad said you had left the country, that you wanted nothing to do with us. But I knew they were lying. They erased me, Bella," I said, the shame burning in my gut. "I have nothing. I am nothing." "You are my brother," she said, her voice steel. "And you are coming home." "I can't," I said, looking around at the squalor. "Look at me. I'm a ghost, Bella. You're a CEO now. I saw you in the papers, wrapped in newspaper I was sleeping on. You can't be seen with me. It will ruin your stock price. The board will—" "To hell with the board!" she shouted, the echo bouncing off the concrete walls. "To hell with the stock price. You think I built that company for them? I built it so I would have the resources to find you. I became powerful so that Mom and Dad could never stop me from bringing you back." She stood up and extended her hand to me. "Get up, Anthony, please." I looked at her hand. It was manicured perfect. Then I looked at my own hand, scarred and blackened. It was a chasm of class and circumstance that seemed too wide to cross. "I can't pay you back," I muttered, the old pride flaring up one last time, weak and pathetic. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "But they owe you everything." The wind howled again, a brutal gust that cut through my layers like a knife. My body convulsed with a shiver so violent my vision blurred. I was at the end. I knew it. If I stayed under this bridge one more night, I would be just another frozen body for the city sanitation workers to collect in the morning. I looked up at Bella. In her eyes, I didn't see pity. I saw fury. I saw love. And for the first time in 5 years, I saw a future. I reached out and took her hand. She gripped me with surprising strength and hauled me to my feet. My legs wobbled, threatening to give out, but she wrapped her arm around my waist, taking my weight. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, big brother." As we walked toward the Rolls-Royce, the chauffeur, a large man with a stoic expression, held the door open. He didn't flinch at the smell. He didn't wrinkle his nose. He simply nodded respectfully as Bella helped me into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, solid thud, sealing out the wind, the noise, and the cold. The silence inside was instant. The air smelled of leather and expensive vanilla. The seat was heated, and the warmth began to seep into my back, a sensation so exquisite it almost made me pass out. As the car began to move, gliding away from the hell of Lower Wacker Drive, I clutched my notebook to my chest. I was leaving the physical cold behind, but as I looked out the tinted window at the retreating city, I knew another kind of war was just beginning. Bella had saved my life. Now, I had to figure out how to make sure that act of kindness didn't destroy hers. And somewhere in a penthouse high above the city, my parents were sleeping soundly, believing their secret was buried under the snow. They were wrong. The snow was melting. And the wolf was coming home. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent and smooth, a sensation of weightlessness that made my stomach turn. I was used to the solid, unyielding ground of the underpass, and this sudden ascent felt like I was being pulled into a different atmosphere. When the doors slid open, I hesitated. The floor was polished marble gleaming under soft, recessed lighting. It looked too clean for me to step on. I looked down at my boots, which were leaving a trail of black slush and grime, and I felt a wave of nausea. I was a contaminant, entering a sterile environment. Bella gently placed a hand on the small of my back and guided me forward. The apartment was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the entire far wall, framing the Chicago skyline and the ink-black expanse of Lake Michigan. From the bridge, the city looked like a monster that had chewed me up. From here, 40 stories up, it looked like a jewelry box. I stood in the center of the living room, afraid to touch the white leather sofa, afraid to breathe too deeply, lest I infect the air. Bella seemed to understand. She did not ask me to sit. She led me straight to the master bathroom. If the apartment was a palace, this room was a sanctuary. There was a soaking tub, the size of a small car, and a walk-in shower with multiple heads. Bella set a stack of thick, fluffy towels on the vanity. "Take your time," she said softly. "There are fresh clothes on the counter. I will be in the kitchen making some soup." When the door clicked shut, I was alone. I stripped off the layers of filth. The coat that had been my blanket, my pillow, and my shield for 5 years fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Then, the 3 shirts stiff with sweat and dirt. Finally, I stood naked before the mirror. I almost didn't recognize the creature staring back at me. I was skeletal. My ribs pressed against my skin like the bars of a cage. My collarbones were sharp ridges. My hair was a matted tangle that reached my shoulders, and my beard was a thick, unruly bush that hid the lower half of my face. But it was the skin that shocked me the most. It was gray, etched with windburn and covered in sores that had never properly healed. I looked like a man who had walked out of a grave. I turned on the shower. I did not wait for the temperature to adjust. I stepped in. The water was hot, shockingly beautifully hot. It hit my back and I gasped, my knees buckling. I slid down the tiled wall until I was sitting on the floor, letting the water hammer against me. It stung my cracked skin, but the pain was exquisite. I watched the water swirling around the drain. It was black. Thick, gray, black water, running off my body, carrying away 5 years of Chicago streets. I scrubbed. I used the bar of soap Bella had left scrubbing until my skin was red and raw, trying to wash away not just the dirt, but the memory of the cold. I stayed in there for an hour, maybe longer, until the water finally ran clear. When I stepped out, I found a pair of scissors and a razor on the counter. My hands trembled as I picked them up. The shearing was not about style. It was an excavation. I cut away the matted locks of hair, watching them fall into the sink like dead leaves. Then came the beard. I shaved slowly, terrified of cutting myself, revealing the jawline I hadn't seen since I was 27. When I looked in the mirror again, Anthony Jones was there. He was older. There were deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes that hadn't been there before. His cheeks were hollow. But the eyes, the gray, sharp eyes of a mathematician, were clear. The haze of survival mode was lifting. I was no longer just an animal trying to not freeze to death. I was a man again. I put on the clothes Bella had left, a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a navy blue cashmere sweater. The fabric felt impossibly light against my skin. I had forgotten what it felt like not to be itchy, not to be damp. I walked out into the living room. Bella was sitting at the kitchen island, staring at a tablet, her brow furrowed. When she heard me, she looked up and her eyes widened. She stood up and walked over, reaching out to touch my arm, as if checking that I was real. "You look like him," she whispered. "You look like my brother." She led me to the sofa. On the coffee table there was a steaming bowl of broth and a loaf of warm bread. Next to the food there was a thick leather folder. "Eat first," she commanded. I ate slowly, forcing myself to pace. My stomach had shrunk, and I knew a heavy meal would make me sick. The broth was rich and salty, and it spread a warmth through my chest that the shower hadn't reached. When I was finished, Bella pushed the leather folder toward me. "Open it," she said. I wiped my hands on a napkin and opened the cover. Inside there were legal documents, a deed to this penthouse fully paid for, and a bank statement from a secure offshore account. My eyes scanned the numbers. I blinked, thinking my vision was blurring. I read it again. $3,450,000. I slammed the folder shut and pushed it away. "I can't take this, Bella," I said, my voice raspy but firm. "I can't take your money. You have done enough. You saved my life tonight. I am not going to drain your accounts." Bella laughed a dry, humorless sound. She reached over and opened the folder again, tapping her manicured fingernail on the header of the statement. "Look at the name on the account, Anthony. It does not say Bella Harrington. It says Anthony Jones." I frowned. "What are you talking about? Do you remember the Sentinel Code?" she asked. The name hit me like a physical blow. The Sentinel Code. It was the last project I had worked on before the fall, an encryption algorithm designed to protect patient data in hospital networks. I had written the core kernel on weekends away from the office servers. "I thought Dad destroyed it," I said. "He told me he wiped my drives when they committed me. He said it was trash." He lied. Bella said, her voice hardening. "He didn't destroy it. He tried to steal it. But he couldn't crack the encryption key you put on the source file. He had the file, but he couldn't open it. But I knew the password." I stared at her. "You knew?" "It was the name of our first dog backwards plus the year I was born," she smiled sadly. "You always use that for the important stuff. Before they kicked you out, I went into your server. I copied the source code. And I registered the copyright in your name under a shell company." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I licensed it to 3 major hospital networks 2 years ago. This isn't my money, Anthony. It is your royalties. Dad has been trying to build a copy of Sentinel for 5 years and failing. Meanwhile, your code has been running half the medical systems in the Midwest. This is your money. You earned every penny of it." I sat back stunned. The air left my lungs. For 5 years, I had believed I was worthless. I believed my genius had evaporated. But while I was sleeping on concrete, my mind, my code, had been working, generating wealth that I couldn't touch. "I don't know what to say," I stammered. "Don't say anything," Bella said. "Just accept it. You need it. Need." I shook my head. "It's too much. I just need a place to sleep and maybe a job. I don't need millions." "You do," Bella cut in, her voice sharp. "You think this is over? You think Mom and Dad are just going to let you walk away now that you are back? Anthony, you are the legitimate heir they tried to erase. If they find out you are alive and that you are sane, they will come for you. They will try to bury you again." She pointed at the check. "This isn't luxury, Anthony. This is armor. You need resources. You need lawyers. You need to be untouchable. Because when they realize you are back, they won't come with hugs. They will come with lawsuits. I looked at the folder again. The number didn't look like money anymore. It looked like ammunition. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay." The next 2 days were a blur of reintegration. Bella didn't let me leave the apartment, and frankly, I wasn't ready to. Instead, the world came to us. A tailor came to measure me for suits, though I insisted on simple jeans and sweaters for now. A doctor made a house call treating my frostbite and prescribing vitamins for the malnutrition. But the hardest part was the phone. Bella handed me a brand new smartphone, a sleek slab of black glass. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. It had been 5 years since I had accessed the internet. 5 years since I had existed digitally. I turned it on. The screen glowed, asking for a fingerprint. I set it up. I spent the first few hours just scrolling. The speed of information was dizzying. I read about the wars I had missed, the elections, the technology. But then I typed 2 words into the search bar. Vanguard Realty. The search results poured in, and my heart began to hammer against my ribs. Vanguard Realty stocks tumble amidst rumors of liquidity crisis. Harrington Empire faces SEC inquiry regarding offshore holdings. Tenants protest unsafe conditions in Vanguard low-income housing. I clicked on an article from 3 days ago. There was a photo of my parents. Robert Harrington looked older, his face puffy, his eyes darting away from the camera. Cynthia, my mother, was wearing huge sunglasses, clutching her purse as she hurried into a black SUV. They looked cornered. "They are drowning," I whispered. Bella walked up behind me and looked at the screen. Yes. They leveraged everything to build that new complex in the South Loop, but they cut too many corners. Inspectors halted construction 6 months ago. They are bleeding cash, Anthony. That is why they tried to pressure me to merge my biotech firm with their realty group. They need fresh capital to cover their debts before the banks foreclose. A cold smile touched my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the wolf I had become. "So they are vulnerable," I said. "Desperate," Bella corrected. "And desperate people are dangerous." I spent the rest of the afternoon diving into the public records. My engineer brain, dormant for so long, woke up with a vengeance. I saw patterns in their financial filings that others missed. I saw the shell companies. I saw the desperate shuffling of assets. They were running a Ponzi scheme with their own properties, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I was sitting on the sofa, the laptop light illuminating my face, when the phone Bella had given me buzzed. It vibrated against the glass coffee table, a harsh, angry sound in the quiet apartment. I froze. No one had this number. Bella had bought the phone under a corporate account just yesterday. I picked it up. The screen didn't show a name, just a number. But I knew the number. It was a landline. Specifically, it was the private line from the study in the mansion in Lake Forest. The number my father used when he was making deals. He didn't want recorded on the company servers. My throat went dry. I looked at Bella. She had gone pale. "Answer it," she whispered. I swiped the green icon and held the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. I just listened to the breathing on the other end. "Hello, Anthony," a voice purred. It was smooth-cultured and laced with arsenic. It was my mother. "We heard a rumor," she continued, her tone light, as if she were discussing the weather and not talking to the son she had left to die. "A little bird told us you were doing some shopping. We are downstairs, darling. Buzz us up. We need to have a family meeting." I looked at the security monitor on the wall. Down in the lobby, standing in front of the concierge desk, were 2 figures. My mother in a fur coat, and my father looking at his watch. They weren't just fast. They were watching. "Buzz us up," she repeated, her voice, dropping an octave, losing the sweetness. "Or we will have the police come up and do a wellness check on a mentally unstable vagrant who has broken into our daughter's home. Your choice." I lowered the phone. I looked at Bella. "They're here," I said. The fear in Bella's eyes was real. But as I looked at her, I felt the fear in my own chest evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't the shivering man under the bridge anymore. I had the armor, I had the code, and I knew their weakness. "Let them in," I told Bella. "Let them come." The doorbell chimed. It was a pleasant melodic sound, a soft, two-note digital hum that was designed to be unobtrusive. But in the sudden silence of the penthouse, it sounded like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Bella stood by the kitchen island, her hands gripping the marble edge so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She looked at me, her eyes wide, with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, a woman who stared down board members and investors. But right now, she was just a little sister, terrified of the monsters under the bed. "It is okay," I said, my voice low and steady. "Let them in." I stood in the center of the living room. I did not sit. I wanted to be standing when they entered. I wanted to be at full height. I was wearing the dark jeans and the navy cashmere sweater Bella had bought me. I was clean. I was shaved. I was no longer the shivering wreck they expected to find. Bella walked to the door. I saw her take a deep breath, composing herself, pulling the mask of the Iron Lady back into place. She unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy door open. Robert and Cynthia Harrington stood there. For a second, nobody moved. It was like looking at a photograph from a society magazine, perfectly lit and airbrushed. My father, Robert, was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than a mid-size sedan. His silver hair was coiffed to perfection, though I noticed the hairline had receded significantly in 5 years, and the skin around his neck was loose, hidden slightly by the high collar of his starch-white shirt. My mother, Cynthia, was draped in a floor-length fur coat despite the fact that the hallway was climate-controlled. Her face was a mask of expensive dermatology, tight, shiny, and devoid of any natural lines. They looked impeccable. They looked successful. They looked like predators. "Anthony!" The scream came from my mother. It was a theatrical, high-pitched wail that would have garnered applause on Broadway. She rushed past Bella, ignoring her completely, and came straight for me. Her arms were outstretched, her face contorted into a grimace of overwhelming emotion. "My baby! My poor lost boy!" She threw her arms around me. The smell of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, mixed with something metallic like hairspray, assaulted my nose. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of cold hugs and distant approval. I stood rigid, my arms at my sides. I did not hug her back. I felt her body pressing against mine, but there was no warmth in it. It felt like being embraced by a statue wrapped in mink. "Thank God," she sobbed into my shoulder, though I noticed her eyes remained dry when she pulled back to look at me. "We thought you were dead. We prayed every night. Every single night, Anthony." "Did you?" I asked. My voice was calm, devoid of any inflection. Robert stepped forward then. He didn't hug me. He extended a hand, the universal gesture of business, not family. "Son," he said, his voice deep and grave, carrying the practiced weight of a man used to commanding boardrooms. "It is a miracle, truly." I looked at his hand. It was manicured, the nails buffed. I remembered that hand signing the papers to have me committed to the sanitarium 5 years ago. I remembered that hand pointing at the door, telling me to get out and never come back. I took it. His grip was firm, testing me. I squeezed back harder. I felt the bones in his hand shift slightly, and a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He pulled his hand away quickly. "Come in," I said, gesturing to the living room. "Since you are already here." They walked into the apartment, and the performance shifted instantly from reunited family to critical inspection. Cynthia walked to the center of the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She spun around her eyes, scanning the furniture, the art on the walls, and the panoramic view of the lake. She ran a hand over the back of the Italian leather sofa. "Well," she said, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. "This is certainly an improvement over wherever you have been. It is good to see you finally living in an environment that suits your breeding, Anthony. We were so worried you would end up in some squalid little apartment." "I was living under a bridge, Mother," I said, watching her carefully. "Squalor would have been an upgrade." Cynthia waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Let us not dwell on the unpleasantness of the past. You are here now. You are safe. That is what matters." Robert walked over to the window, looking out at the city he claimed to own. He turned back to me, his face serious. "Bella tells us she found you," he said, nodding toward my sister, who was still standing by the door, arms crossed. "Resourceful girl, we are proud of her." "You did not seem proud when you threatened to call the police on me 5 minutes ago," I observed. Robert chuckled a dry, hollow sound. "Emotions were high, Anthony. You have to understand. We received a report that a strange man was in our daughter's home. We were protecting her. That is what parents do. We protect." He walked over to the kitchen island and leaned against it, making himself comfortable. He looked at me with a gaze that I recognized. It was the look he gave a distressed asset before he acquired it. "We need to talk about your situation, Anthony," Robert said, his tone shifting to business casual. "We know about the arrangement." "What arrangement?" I asked, playing innocent. "The money," Robert said bluntly. "The $3,450,000. I didn't blink. He knew the exact figure, not about 3 million. The exact figure down to the tens of thousands. That meant he had access to Bella's banking records, or he had someone inside the bank. "And the condo," Cynthia added, walking over to stand beside her husband. "Fully paid for, prime real estate. Bella has been very generous with the family trust." "It is not family trust money," Bella spoke up for the first time, her voice shaking slightly, but clear. "It is Anthony's money. Royalties from the Sentinel Code." Robert laughed again. "The Sentinel Code, please. That old project? Anthony, be realistic. Bella gave you a handout, and that is fine. We are a family. We help each other. But here is the reality, son." He pushed off the counter and walked toward me, stopping just inside my personal space. "You have been on the streets for 5 years. 5 years, Anthony. That does things to a man's mind. It erodes his judgment. You are fragile right now. You are in no state to manage a portfolio of that size." "I feel fine," I said. "That is exactly what a person in a manic state would say," Cynthia interjected, her voice dripping with fake concern. She tilted her head, looking at me with pity. "Look at you. You are thin. You are intense. You have just experienced a massive trauma. Suddenly having $3 million dropped in your lap? It is a recipe for disaster. You will be preyed upon. Scammers, thieves, fake friends. They will smell the money on you and pick you clean in a week." "I am good at spotting predators," I said, locking eyes with her. She didn't flinch. "We are not predators, Anthony. We are your parents. We want to secure your future. Listen to me. Handing you that much cash is like handing a loaded gun to a toddler. It is negligent." Robert nodded in agreement. "Here is what we are going to do. It is very simple. You transfer the funds to the Vanguard Realty Capital holding account. We will classify it as a priority investment. I can guarantee you a 12% return per annum. We will manage the taxes, the legal fees, everything. We will set up a monthly allowance for you. $5,000. That is plenty for groceries and incidentals. You live here rent-free, bill-free, and your principal grows safely under my watch." I almost laughed. A 12% return from a company that was drowning in debt? A company that was under SEC investigation? He wasn't asking for an investment. He was asking for a bailout. He needed my $3 million to pay off the immediate interest on his loans to keep the sharks at bay for another month. "That is a generous offer," I said softly. "It is the only sensible offer," Robert said, relaxing slightly, thinking he had closed the deal. "Vanguard is expanding. We have a new development in the South Loop." "The one with the structural cracks?" I interrupted. The room went dead silent. Robert's smile froze. A tic developed under his left eye. "Excuse me." "I have been catching up on the news," I said, walking over to the coffee table and picking up the new phone. The inspectors halted construction. The concrete mix was diluted. Substandard materials. "You are not expanding, Robert. You are sinking." Robert's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his suit. The mask slipped, revealing the anger underneath. "You do not know what you are talking about," he snapped. "That is fake news. Competitor sabotage. The project is solid." "I don't think so," I said. "And to answer your offer? No." "No," Cynthia repeated, her voice sharpening. "No," I said. "I will manage my own money. I will keep it exactly where it is." The air in the room changed. It was no longer a negotiation. It was a hostage situation. Robert took a step closer to me. He was taller than me, or at least he used to be. Now, standing eye to eye, I realized I had grown, or perhaps he had just shrunk under the weight of his own lies. "Anthony," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl, "do not be difficult. We are trying to do this the easy way." "What is the hard way?" I asked. Cynthia sighed a long, tragic sound. She opened her designer purse and pulled out a small, cream-colored business card. She placed it gently on the coffee table. "Sterling Associates," she said. "Family law and mental health advocacy." I looked at the card. I knew the name. Sterling was a fixer, a lawyer who specialized in conservatorships for the wealthy and unstable. "We love you, Anthony," Cynthia said, her eyes cold as ice. "But you have a history. You have a documented history of mental instability, paranoid delusions, drug abuse." "You planted those drugs," I said. "Did we?" Robert countered effortlessly. "Or was that just another delusion? The police report says they found cocaine in your drawer. The psychiatric evaluation from the sanitarium says you were suffering from a breakdown. That is the official record, Anthony. That is the truth in the eyes of the law." He gestured around the room. "You are a homeless man who has been off the grid for 5 years. You have no job history, no address history, and a medical record that reads like a horror story. If we go to a judge tomorrow and tell them that our mentally ill son has suddenly come into possession of $3 million and is refusing treatment, what do you think they will do?" He let the question hang in the air. "They will grant us emergency guardianship," he answered himself. "They will freeze your accounts. They will give us control over your medical decisions and your finances. And they might even think it is best for you to return to the facility for a refresher course." I felt Bella step forward behind me. "You can't do that. I will testify against you." "And destroy your own company?" Cynthia shot back, whipping her head around to face Bella. "You think your investors want to hear that their CEO is harboring a mentally unstable addict and fighting a legal war with her own parents? Vanguard owns 10% of your startup, Bella. We can make your stock tank before the market opens on Monday." It was a masterclass in manipulation. They had covered every angle. They used shame, fear, and legal threats to box us in. They were not asking for the money. They were mugging me in my own living room. "So," Robert said, smoothing his tie, "let us stop this nonsense. Transfer the funds. We will manage them. You stay here, enjoy your new life, and we will forget all about Mr. Sterling and the judge. Do we have a deal?" I looked at them, really looked at them. For years I had feared them. I had thought they were omnipotent giants who controlled the world. But now, seeing them up close, seeing the sweat beading on Robert's upper lip, Seeing the slight tremor in Cynthia's hand holding the purse, I realized the truth. They were terrified. They needed that $3 million desperately. Without it, the house of cards would fall. The threat of the conservatorship was real, yes, but it would take time, court dates, hearings, evaluations. They didn't have time. They needed cash today. The aggression was a bluff. I smiled. It was a slow, deliberate curving of my lips that I knew unsettled them. "Leave the card," I said softly. Robert blinked. "What?" "Leave the lawyer's card," I said. "I might need it." "So you are agreeing?" Robert asked, hope flaring in his eyes. "I am saying I will think about it," I lied. "Now get out of my apartment." Robert bristled, his face hardening again. "You have 24 hours, Anthony. If that money is not in the Vanguard account by noon tomorrow, Sterling files the petition." "We are doing this because we love you," Cynthia added the final, twisting knife of gaslighting. "Don't make us hurt you." They turned and marched to the door. They moved with the stiff, angry gait of people who were used to instant obedience. Bella closed the door behind them and locked it, then leaned her forehead against the wood, shaking. "They are going to do it," she whispered. "They are going to lock you up again." I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I watched as the two small figures emerged from the building and got into their black SUV. I watched them drive away, disappearing into the traffic of Chicago. "No, they won't," I said quietly. "How can you be sure?" Bella asked, turning to me with tear-filled eyes. "You heard them. They have the medical records. They have the lawyers." I turned back to her. My pulse was steady. My mind was clear. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like prey. "Because they are thirsty, Bella," I said. "A drowning man doesn't want to wait for a lifeguard to fill out paperwork. He wants a rope. And if they want a rope, I am going to give them one." I looked at the business card on the table. "But it is going to be a noose." The silence in the penthouse after my parents left was heavy, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a chess player staring at the board, realizing that his opponent has left a queen exposed. They had given me 24 hours. They thought that was a deadline. I saw it as a window of opportunity. I turned to Bella. She was still shaking, her face pale. "Give me the laptop," I said, "and I need the secure Wi-Fi password." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Transfer the money?" "No," I replied, sitting down at the kitchen island and cracking my knuckles. "I am going to perform an autopsy." I needed a scalpel, and in the digital world, I knew exactly who to call. I opened a secure browser and navigated to a dead-drop email address I hadn't used in half a decade. I typed a single line of text. "The wolf is out of the cage. Blue protocol." I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was an encrypted voice call. "I thought you were dead," the voice on the other end said. It was deep, calm, and laced with the static of a voice changer. "Hello, Marcus," I said. Marcus had been my junior developer at Harrington Tech before the fall. He was a brilliant kid from the South Side who taught himself code on a library computer. I had hired him when no one else would look at his resume because of a juvenile record. I had mentored him, protected him, and when my parents fired me, he was the only one who tried to resign in protest. I had forced him to stay, to keep his head down. Now, 5 years later, he was one of the most sought-after freelance cybersecurity consultants in Chicago. A white-hat hacker who knew where all the bodies were buried. "Anthony?" The voice changer clicked off. "My God, the rumors are true. You are back." "I am back," I said, "and I need eyes, Marcus. I need deep-dive access into Vanguard Realty. Not the public filings. I need the internal books, the shadow ledgers." "That is a felony, boss," Marcus said, though I could hear the clicking of a mechanical keyboard already starting in the background. My parents just tried to blackmail me into a conservatorship, I said. They are threatening to take Bella down with me. This is self-defense. There was a pause. Give me 10 minutes. I will set up a mirrored server. I will send you the link. Don't use your own IP address. 15 minutes later, the 60-inch television screen in the living room was displaying the internal nervous system of my parents' empire. Marcus was on speakerphone, guiding us through the labyrinth of shell companies and offshore holdings. This is ugly, Marcus muttered. I have never seen so much red ink. It looks like a slaughterhouse. I stood in front of the screen, my eyes scanning the rows of data with the hunger of a starving man. My parents had told me they needed my $3 million for an investment opportunity. They lied. Zoom in on the liabilities column for the fiscal year ending 2025, I commanded. The screen shifted. The numbers were staggering. $50 million, Bella gasped, hand flying to her mouth. They owe $50 million? That is just the primary debt to the commercial lenders, I said, pointing at the screen. Look at the maturation dates. These are short-term high-yield bonds, junk bonds. They took these out 18 months ago to finance the South Loop project. And look at the due date. February 15th, Marcus read out. That is 12 days from now. They have to pay back the principal plus interest in 12 days, I said, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into place. If they miss that payment, the bank sees the collateral. What is the collateral? Bella asked. I looked at the line item. Everything. The mansion in Lake Forest. The office tower downtown, and I squinted at the text. Your shares, Bella. My shares? Bella screamed. I never signed my shares over as collateral. You didn't, I said, my voice cold. But look at the signature on the guarantor document. It is dated 3 years ago. It looks like your signature, but the pen pressure is wrong. It is a forgery. Mom forged your signature to secure the loan. Bella collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. They stole my company. They stole it years ago. It gets worse, Marcus said. I am looking at their cash flow. They have zero liquidity. Their operating accounts are empty. They are paying the electric bills with credit cards. But here is the strange part. Look at the withdrawal requests for this week. I leaned in. There was a pending wire transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. The amount was exactly $3 million. That is my money, I said. They wanted me to transfer it so they could wire it out immediately. But who is the recipient? Bella asked, looking up. The bank? No, I said. The bank debt is $50 million. $3 million would not even cover the interest. This is going somewhere else. The recipient is a shell company called Consulting Partners LLC, based in the Cayman Islands, Marcus said. I am tracing the beneficial owner hold on, breaking through the privacy shield now. The screen flickered, code, scrolling rapidly. Then a name appeared, Jonathan P. Sterling. The lawyer? Bella asked. Why are they paying their lawyer $3 million? Sterling isn't just a lawyer, I said, jogging my memory. He used to work for the government. He was a deputy director at the regional SEC office before he went private. Search for SEC and Vanguard in their email server, I ordered Marcus. A moment later, an email popped up on the screen. It was marked urgent/confidential. It was from the Securities and Exchange Commission dated 2 weeks ago. Subject, Wells Notice. Investigation into accounting irregularities. I read the email aloud. The Commission has found preliminary evidence that Vanguard Realty has systematically inflated asset values to defraud investors. A formal audit and site inspection is scheduled for February 10th. I turned to Bella. February 10th. That is 1 week from now. I don't understand, Bella said. What does the money do? It is a bribe, I said flatly. Sterling still has friends at the SEC. My parents are not paying Sterling for legal fees. They are paying him to pass the money under the table to someone on the inside. They want to delay the inspection. If they can push the audit back by 3 months, they think they can find another loan to pay off the bonds. They are buying time. They are trying to bribe a federal official, Bella whispered. That is prison time, Anthony. That is 20 years in federal prison. They are desperate, I said. They are cornered animals, and that makes them predictable. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights. My mind was racing, calculating probabilities, assessing risks. It was forensic accounting, but it was also psychological warfare. They need a scapegoat, I said, turning back to the room. What do you mean? Bella asked. Think about it, I explained. The ship is sinking. The SEC is coming, the banks are coming. Even if they pay the bribe, the fraud is too big to hide forever. Eventually, Vanguard is going to crash. And when a company crashes, someone has to go to jail. I walked over to the screen and pointed at a draft document in their legal folder, titled RE, Corporate Restructuring. Look at this, I said. They were planning to appoint a new chief financial officer next week. Who? Marcus asked. Me, I said. Or, rather, the person who provides the emergency injection of capital. If I transfer that money and sign their papers, I don't just become an investor. I become an officer of the company. I become the person responsible for the books. Bella stood up, horror dawning on her face. They were going to pin it on you. They were going to make you the CFO, let the bribe happen under your name. And when the SEC finally busts them, they would say, "Oh, our mentally unstable son did it. We had no idea." Exactly, I said. I would be the perfect patsy. I have a history of instability. I have no allies. I would go to prison for the rest of my life, and they would play the victim card again. Those monsters, Bella hissed, tears of rage streaming down her face. They are not humans. No, I agreed. They are not. And that is why we are going to destroy them. How? Marcus asked. If you don't give them the money, they file for the conservatorship tomorrow. They lock you up. If you do give them the money, they frame you for fraud. I am not going to run, I said, and I am not going to fight them in court. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I picked up the phone. Marcus, I need you to draft some documents. I need them to look official. I need them to look like the most complex, watertight international financial instruments ever written. What are we building? Marcus asked, his tone curious. We are building a Trojan horse, I said. I looked at Bella. You said you have the copyright to the Sentinel Code, right? Yes, she nodded. Good. And I have $3 million in cash. But that is not enough to dazzle them. To blind them, we need more. We need a number so big that their greed overrides their caution. I paced the room. Marcus, I need you to create a digital wallet, a cryptocurrency wallet. I want you to populate the transaction history to make it look like I have been mining Bitcoin since 2016. I want the balance to show, I paused, calculating. $15 million. $15 million? Marcus whistled. That is a lot of fake money. It has to be fake, I said. But the wallet has to look real on a surface scan. Can you do it? I can create a view-only wallet that pulls data from the blockchain, but mirrors it to look like it belongs to a specific private key, Marcus said. To anyone looking at the app on your phone, it will look 100% real. But if they try to spend it without the master key, which doesn't exist, it will fail. Perfect, I said. What is the plan, Anthony? Bella asked. I walked over to the whiteboard in the kitchen and picked up a marker. I drew a circle and wrote Vanguard inside it. Then I drew an arrow pointing to it. We are going to tell them I accept their offer, I said, but not the $3 million. I'm going to tell them that I have a secret stash, $15 million in crypto. Enough to pay off a chunk of their debt and save the company. They will jump at it, Bella said. They will drool over it, I corrected. I will offer to merge my assets with Vanguard. I will sign their papers. I will become their savior. But in the contract, the one Marcus is going to help me write tonight, there will be a clause, a poison pill. What kind of clause? Marcus asked. A clause that states that the injection of these personal funds is contingent upon a full assumption of liability by the existing board members for any prior acts of malfeasance, I said, my voice dropping. And more importantly, we are going to bury a digital tracer in the transfer protocol. A tracer? Yes, I said. When they try to access the fake $15 million to pay the bribe or pay the bank, they will have to input their own administrative credentials to receive the funds. Once they input those credentials into the interface, Marcus builds, we will have admin access to their entire banking system. Real access. We can download the proof of the forgery, Bella realized. The proof that they stole my shares. And the proof of the bribe, I added. We won't just stop the audit. We will hand-deliver the evidence to the FBI. This is dangerous, Anthony, Marcus said seriously. If they figure out the money is fake before they sign, or if they have their tech guys look too closely. They won't, I said. They are arrogant. They think I am a broken man. They think I am stupid. And most of all, they are terrified of losing everything next week. Greed and fear are the only two things driving them right now. They won't look closely. They will just see the zeros. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. We have 12 hours before their deadline, I said. Marcus, start coding the wallet interface. Bella, I need you to find every scrap of paper you have on the merger they propose to you. We are going to counteroffer. We are going to invite them to a party. A party? Bella asked. A signing ceremony, I smiled. We are going to do this in public. We are going to give them their moment of triumph. We are going to let them hold the trophy high. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The ghost of the bridge was gone. The engineer was back. And then, I whispered, we are going to watch it all burn down. The next morning, the air in the penthouse felt thick enough to choke on. The clock on the wall seemed to be ticking louder than usual, counting down the seconds to noon. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my knees bouncing nervously. This time, the nerves were not entirely fake. I was about to walk into a cage with 3 lions, armed with nothing but a whip, made of ones and zeros. Bella was pacing the kitchen, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the tile. She looked pale, her eyes darting to the door every time the wind rattled the window pane. You have to sell it, Anthony, she whispered, stopping to look at me. If they sense even for a second that you are faking it, they will bury us. I know, I said, staring at my hands. I let my shoulders slump forward, curving my spine into the defensive posture I had worn for 5 years. I practiced the tremor in my right hand, letting it shake just enough to be noticeable. I am not Anthony Jones, the engineer today. I am the ghost from under the bridge. At 11:55, the doorbell rang. It was not the polite chime of a guest. It was a demand. Bella went to the door. I stayed seated, shrinking into the cushions, making myself look small. When the door opened, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert and Cynthia walked in first. They were dressed for a funeral, or perhaps a hostile takeover. Robert wore a black suit that looked like armor. Cynthia was in the dark navy, her face set in a mask of tragic determination. But it was the third man who sucked the oxygen out of the room. He was tall, thin, and moved with the silent, slippery grace of an eel. He wore a suit that was too shiny, a tie that was too red, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His skin had a grayish pallor, as if he spent his life under fluorescent lights, reading fine print. Anthony, my father said, his voice booming. We brought a friend. Mr. Jones, the man said, stepping forward. His voice was like oil sliding over gravel. Jonathan Sterling, it is a pleasure to finally meet the subject of so much discussion. I didn't stand up. I looked at the floor, avoiding his gaze. Hello. They sat down opposite me. Sterling placed a thick, black briefcase on the coffee table. The click of the latches opening sounded like a gun being cocked. He pulled out a stack of documents, crisp and heavy. Let us skip the pleasantries, Robert said, checking his watch. It is noon. The transfer has not been made. We gave you a chance, Anthony. Cynthia sighed, shaking her head, as if I had disappointed her deeply. We really did. But you have left us no choice. Sterling slid the document across the table. The header was bold and terrifying. Petition for emergency conservatorship and power of attorney. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling. I forced a stutter into the words. I don't understand. It is a legal document that declares you incompetent to manage your own affairs. Sterling explained, his tone bored, as if he were ordering lunch. Given your history of substance abuse, your undocumented status for 5 years, and your sudden erratic behavior, a judge will sign this by 4 o'clock this afternoon. It grants your parents full control over your assets, your medical decisions, and your physical location. You are going to lock me up, I whispered, looking at Bella. Bella, they are going to lock me up. Bella stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. You can't do this. He is sane. He is recovering. He is a liability, Robert snapped, slamming his hand on the table. And so are you, Bella. Do you think we haven't prepared for your interference? He pulled out another folder. We have prepared a press release, Robert said, his eyes cold. It details how the CEO of Biogen is currently harboring a known drug addict with a history of violent outbursts. We have statements from anonymous sources claiming you have been using company funds to support his habit. If we release this, your stock will crash before the closing bell. Your board will fire you by tomorrow morning. Bella gasped. That is a lie. You know that is a lie? The market does not care about truth, Cynthia said smoothly. The market cares about perception. Do you really want to lose your company, Bella? Just to protect a brother who is clearly too broken to function. I let out a whimper. It was a pathetic sound, high and thin. I saw Sterling sneer slightly. Good. He despised me. He underestimated me. Please, I begged, looking from Robert to Cynthia. I started to rock back and forth, rubbing my arms, as if I were cold. Please don't hurt Bella. I don't want to go back to the hospital. I can't go back there. The walls scream. I saw a flicker of satisfaction in Robert's eyes. He bought it. He saw the broken man he wanted to see. Then sign the paper, Robert said, pointing to the document. Sign the power of attorney. We will manage the money. You can stay here. We won't release the story about Bella. We will take care of you, son. Just like we always have. Cynthia leaned forward. She reached out and placed her hand on my knee. Her palm was cold. Anthony, look at me, she said, her voice dropping to that practiced maternal coo. We just want you to be safe. You are not built for this world anymore. You are fragile. Let us carry the burden. You just sign and we will buy you that little villa in the Hamptons you used to love. You can paint. You can rest. No more cold. No more hunger, just peace. It was a beautiful lie. If I were truly the man they thought I was, I would have signed it in a heartbeat. I reached for the pen Sterling was holding out. My hand shook violently. I hovered the pen over the signature line. The room was silent. I could hear Robert's breathing. Shallow, anticipated. Then I stopped. I dropped the pen. I can't, I whispered. What do you mean you can't? Robert barked, his patience snapping. Pick up the pen. I can't sign this because it is not enough, I said, looking up at them. My eyes were wide, fearful. If I sign this, you will only get the $3 million. $3 million is fine, Cynthia said, confused. What are you talking about? I looked around the room as if checking for spies. I leaned in close, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I lied to you, I stammered. Bella didn't know, nobody knew. But under the bridge, I wasn't just sleeping. What is he babbling about? Sterling asked, looking at his watch. The laptop, I said. I had a laptop, old one. Stole it from a library. I mined. Mined? Robert frowned. Mined what? Coal. Bitcoin, I said. And Ethereum. 10 years ago, before the crash. Before you kicked me out. I had a server running in the basement of the old house. You didn't know. I saved the keys on a hard drive. I kept it with me. Under the bridge, it was the only thing I didn't sell. I saw Sterling's ears perk up. He sat up straighter. How much, Anthony? Sterling asked, his voice sharp. I swallowed hard. I checked the wallet yesterday. It has grown. How much? Robert demanded. $15 million, I whispered. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum sucking the air out of the room. Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Cynthia's eyes widened so much. I thought the skin surgery would tear. Sterling froze his calculator brain, instantly crunching the numbers. 15 million, plus the 3 million from the royalties. $18 million. It wasn't just a lifeline. It was a fortune. It was enough to pay the bribe, pay the interest, and still have enough left over to buy a yacht. 15 million, Robert repeated, his voice cracking. You have $15 million in cryptocurrency. Yes, I nodded, tears leaking from my eyes. But I can't touch it. That is the problem. If I try to cash it out, the IRS, they will see I haven't paid taxes in 5 years. They will take it all. They will put me in jail for tax evasion. I grabbed Robert's hand. I made my grip desperate, sweaty. Dad, please, I cried. I don't want to go to jail. I don't know how to wash it. I don't know how to make it legal. You are a businessman. You know how to do these things. If I sign the money over to you, can you hide it? Can you save it for me? I watched the gears turn in their heads. It was fascinating, really. I was offering them the very thing they were terrified of losing, control and wealth, on a silver platter. I was appealing to their greed and their arrogance. I was telling them that I was too stupid to be rich, and that only they were smart enough to handle the money. It was the perfect bait. Robert looked at Cynthia. A silent communication passed between them. The panic of the impending audit, the fear of the debt, it all vanished, replaced by the golden glow of avarice. 15 million, Cynthia breathed. Robert, that clears the South Loop debt entirely. And the audit, Robert muttered. We could pay double Sterling. Sterling cleared his throat. If these assets exist, Mr. Harrington taking control of them via a conservatorship would be messy. The courts would audit the inventory, the government would see the crypto wallet. So what do we do? Robert asked, turning to the lawyer. We don't use the court, Sterling said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. We do a direct merger. Anthony voluntarily merges his personal assets into Vanguard Realty in exchange for a non-voting board seat. We structure it as a private capital injection. It bypasses the probate court entirely. Vanguard absorbs the crypto, we liquidate it through our offshore entities to minimize the tax hit, and then we reallocate the funds as needed. Reallocate meant steal. But Anthony has to agree, Sterling said, looking at me. He has to sign a different document, a merger agreement, and he has to give us the private keys to the wallet. Robert turned back to me. His face was no longer angry. I was hungry. He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it. Anthony, son, he said, his voice trembling with excitement. You did the right thing telling us. You are right. The IRS would destroy you, but we can protect you. We can bring that money into the company, make it safe. You will help me, I sniffled. Of course, Cynthia said, beaming. We are family. We help each other. I just want to come home, I said, wiping my nose on my sleeve. I just want to be useful again, You are useful, Anthony, Robert said. Very useful. Now, where is this wallet? It is on my phone, I said. I can transfer it. But I need guarantees. I need to know I won't be thrown out again. We will draw up the papers right now, Sterling said, opening his laptop. A full merger. You will be a partner, Anthony. A silent partner, of course, for your own health. But you will be taken care of for life. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible. Okay, I will do it. Sterling began typing furiously. Robert and Cynthia sat back, looking at each other with triumphant smiles. They thought they had won the lottery. They thought they had manipulated their idiot son into handing over a fortune. I kept my head down, hiding my face. I wasn't hiding tears. I was hiding a smile. They had taken the bait. They were going to let the Trojan horse right through the front gates. Bella, Robert said, his tone dismissive and arrogant again. Go get us some champagne. We have a celebration to attend to. Bella looked at me. I gave the slightest imperceptible nod. Right away, Father, she said, her voice steady. As she walked to the kitchen, I watched Sterling typing the contract that would be their death warrant. I let out a long, shaky breath. Thank you, I said to my parents. Thank you for saving me. Don't mention it, Robert said, already mentally spending the money. That is what parents are for. The irony was so thick I could taste it. They were right. They were saving me. They were saving me the trouble of having to break into their systems because they were about to hand me the keys themselves. One thing, Sterling said, pausing his typing. We will need to verify the wallet balance before we sign. Due diligence. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my composure. Sure, I said. I can show you. I pulled out my phone and opened the app Marcus had built. The interface was sleek, professional. I tapped the icon. It loaded for a second. A spinning golden coin. And then displayed the dashboard. Total balance, 350.45 BTC USD value, $15,240,000. I turned the screen toward them. Robert's eyes bulged. Cynthia gasped. Sterling leaned in, adjusting his glasses. It is real, Sterling whispered. My God. Is it safe? Robert asked, reaching out as if to touch the screen. It is encrypted, I said, pulling the phone back. I have the password. Once we sign, I will give it to you. Type faster, Sterling, Robert commanded. I sat back, clutching the phone to my chest. The wolf inside me was howling, but the ghost on the outside just kept shivering. We had them. We had them cold. The agreement was verbal, but in the world of high finance and low morals, a handshake is worth less than the air it displaces. I needed ink on paper, and more importantly, I needed an audience. As Sterling packed up his laptop, satisfied that he had successfully bullied a mentally ill man into submission, I cleared my throat. I have one condition, I said, my voice still carrying the tremor of the broken sun. Robert paused his hand halfway to his pocket to retrieve his car keys. We have already discussed the allowance, Anthony. $5,000 a month, it is generous. No, I said, shaking my head. Not money, dignity. I stood up, wrapping my arms around myself as if the cashmere sweater offered no warmth. You erased me. For 5 years, I was a ghost. People think I am dead. If I give you this money, if I save the company, I want to be alive again. I want people to know that I am a Harrington. Cynthia softened her eyes, gleaming with the prospect of a public relations coup. What are you suggesting, darling? A ceremony, I said. A public signing. I want you to announce the Family Reconstruction Fund. I want the world to see that the prodigal son has returned, and that the family is whole again. Robert frowned. We don't have time for a gala, Anthony. The bond payments are due. We can do it tonight, I pressed. Or tomorrow night. Just a cocktail reception. Invite the partners, invite the press. If you want the market to trust Vanguard again, don't you think they need to see unity? I watched Robert's ego wrestle with his urgency. His ego won. It always did. The idea of parading his recovered son and his newfound $15 million in front of the very people who were whispering about his bankruptcy was too intoxicating to resist. He saw it as a victory lap. I saw it as a public execution. "The Palmer House Hilton," Robert declared, a smile spreading across his face. "The Grand Ballroom. We will host it tomorrow evening. The Harrington Gala, a legacy reborn. I will have my secretary send out the invites immediately. Everyone will come. They will come to smell blood, but they will stay to smell the money." "Perfect," I whispered. "Now," Robert said, pulling out his phone, "about that wallet key. I need to verify the balance for the board before I book the venue." "I can't give you the key until we sign," I said, clutching my phone. "But I can let you ping the wallet to prove it is active." "Do it," he commanded. I held up my phone. "You need to scan this QR code with your banking app. It is a view-only permission token." Robert fumbled with his phone. He was a dinosaur in the digital age, a man who still typed with his index fingers. He opened his camera, but his hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the deal. "It is not focusing," he snapped. "Here," I said, reaching out. "Let me help, the lighting is bad." He handed me his phone. It was an unlocked iPhone, the gateway to his entire life. I held his phone in my left hand and mine in my right. I pretended to align the cameras. In reality, I tapped the screen of his phone against the NFC chip embedded in the back of my custom device. It took exactly 3 seconds. Marcus's malware, nicknamed the Leech, jumped from my device to his, burying itself deep in the root directory of his operating system. "There," I said, handing the phone back. "It went through." Robert looked at his screen. The fake app I had built displayed a green checkmark and the number 15,240,000 USD, verified. He let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "It is real. Cynthia, it is real." "Of course it is," I said, lowering my eyes. "I just want to help." "We will see you tomorrow at 7, Robert said, pocketing the compromised phone. "Wear a suit, a real one. Sterling will bring the final contracts to the hotel." When the door clicked shut behind them, the shivering stopped instantly. I stood up straight and walked to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. My hand was steady as a rock. "Is it done?" Bella asked, emerging from the hallway where she had been listening. "The hook is set," I said. "Now we just need to build the trapdoor." I spent the next 6 hours with Marcus on a secure video link. We were drafting the contract that Sterling would present tomorrow. We knew Sterling would use a standard merger template, complex enough to confuse a layman, but standard enough to pass a quick legal review. He expected me to just sign whatever he put in front of me. He was wrong. "I need a specific clause inserted into the liability section," I told Marcus. "We need to make it look like a standard indemnity waiver, but I want to flip the subject and object." "Explain," Marcus said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "Sterling will write that I, the investor, indemnify Vanguard against future losses," I said. "I want to add a subsection, Article 9, Section C. Create a title, Senior Technical Advisor role, and asset verification responsibility." "You want a job?" Marcus asked. "I need a title to justify the clause," I explained. "I will request to be named Senior Technical Advisor to oversee the integration of the crypto assets. It sounds like a vanity title for a useless son. Robert will accept it because it keeps me under his thumb." "Okay," Marcus said. "And the clause?" "The clause," I dictated, "will state that in his capacity as chairman and recipient of the capital injection, Robert Harrington personally assumes full and retroactive liability for any and all debts, liens, or encumbrances attached to the source funds and warrants the solvency of the receiving entity, Vanguard Realty, against the value of said funds." "Wait," Marcus laughed. That is brilliant. You are making him guarantee the value of your fake money. Not just that, I said. The legal language implies that if the source funds, my crypto, turn out to be encumbered or invalid, the recipient, Robert, accepts that the debt created by the failed transfer becomes his personal debt, not the company's. Since the $15 million doesn't exist when the transfer fails, the contract will interpret that gap as a debt he owes to the company. So, when the money vanishes, Marcus summarized, he doesn't just lose the bailout. He legally owes Vanguard $15 million out of his own pocket. And, since Vanguard owes the bank $50 million, I added, and he is the guarantor, he will be personally on the hook for everything. The corporate veil will be pierced. He will lose the mansion, the cars, the offshore accounts, everything. It is nasty, Marcus said admiringly. But will Sterling catch it? Sterling is lazy, I said. He thinks I am an idiot. And I am going to insist on this clause at the last minute, right before the party, claiming, I just want to make sure my job is secure. They will be so desperate to get the signature, they won't parse the grammar. Drafting it now, Marcus said. I will inject it into the PDF on Sterling's cloud drive. When he prints it out for the ceremony, the clause will be there. What about the phone? I asked. I am in, Marcus confirmed. I have access to his emails, his texts, and his GPS. I am also mirroring his microphone. I can hear him breathing right now. Keep recording, I said. I want every conversation he has with Sterling between now and the party. Bella walked into the living room. She was holding a garment bag. I bought you a tuxedo, she said quietly. I looked at the bag. Thank you. She didn't hand it to me. She just stood there, gripping the hanger. Anthony, this is dangerous. You are playing with fire. If they find out the money is fake before the FBI arrives, Robert has connections to people who break legs for a living. I know, I said. Is it worth it? She asked. We could just run. We have $3 million. We could go to Europe. We could start over. I walked over to her and gently took the bag. Fire is the only thing that burns trash, Bella. If we run, they win. They will keep hurting people. They will keep building unsafe apartments. They will keep destroying lives like they destroyed mine. I am not running anymore. She looked into my eyes, searching for the brother she remembered. She found him, but he was hardened, like steel tempered in ice. Okay, she whispered. Then let us burn it down. I turned back to the computer. It was time for the final nail. I opened the secure portal to the FBI's whistleblower tip line. I had already compiled the dossier. It was a masterpiece of evidence. Exhibit A. The internal emails from Robert directing the construction crew to use diluted concrete for the South Loop Foundation. Exhibit B. The forged stock transfer documents stealing Bella's company. Exhibit C. The email chain between Robert and Sterling discussing the bribe for the SEC official. Exhibit D. The audio recording Marcus had just captured from Robert's phone, where he was currently bragging to a mistress about how he had swindled his idiot son. I uploaded the files. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Green. Steady. I did not hit send. Instead, I clicked schedule. I set the time for tomorrow, February 4th, 8:30 p.m. That would be exactly 30 minutes after the signing ceremony began. Just enough time for the champagne to be poured. Just enough time for Robert to make his victory speech. Just enough time for the flashbulbs to blind him before the handcuffs clicked. I leaned back in the chair. My work was done. The script was written. The actors were in place. All that was left was the performance. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Hello, Mother," I answered, putting the phone on speaker so Bella could hear. "Anthony!" Cynthia's voice was shrill with excitement. "It is all arranged. The florist is flying in white lilies from Holland. The caterer is preparing Wagyu beef sliders. It is going to be the event of the season." That sounds expensive, I said, keeping my voice meek. Oh, stop it, she laughed. You are paying for it, darling. Or rather, the fund is. It is a business expense. Now listen to me. A stylist is coming to the penthouse at noon tomorrow to groom you. Do not cut your hair again. We want you to look redeemed, but still a little bit artistically rugged. It sells the narrative. Okay, Mother. And Anthony, she lowered her voice. Make sure you bring the phone with the wallet. Sterling wants to do the transfer live on stage. It will be a symbolic moment. The passing of the torch. I will bring it, I promised. Good boy, she said. We are so proud of you. Finally. She hung up. I looked at the phone, then at Bella. Proud, I repeated, tasting the word like sour milk. They are going to hate you so much, Bella said, a hint of a smile finally touching her lips. I count on it, I said. I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline one last time. The snow was falling again, dusting the city in white. Under the bridge it would be freezing. Silas and the others would be huddling for warmth. One more thing, I said to Bella. Transfer $50,000 to the St. Jude's homeless shelter. Make it anonymous. Consider it done, she said. I touched the cold glass of the window. Get some sleep, Bella, I said. Tomorrow we go to war. The man in the mirror was a stranger. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that cost more than I had spent on food in the last 5 years combined. The fabric was Italian silk, cool and fluid against my skin, cut to millimeter perfection by the tailor Bella had summoned. The shirt was crisp, white stiff with starch. The bow tie was hand-tied, a black silk butterfly perched at my throat. I touched the glass. The reflection raised a hand to meet mine. 5 days ago, this face had been hidden behind a beard of matted hair and grime. Now the jawline was sharp, the skin scrubbed raw and moisturized, the hair cut into a precise, modern style that swept back from my forehead. I looked like a Harrington. I looked like money. I looked like the kind of man who walked past people under bridges without breaking stride. But the eyes were different. The eyes were still the eyes of the wolf. They were hollowed out dark and burning with a cold blue flame that no amount of expensive tailoring could hide. I adjusted the cuffs of the jacket. It felt less like clothing and more like a costume. Tonight, I was playing a role. I was the prodigal son, the redeemed heir, the golden goose. As I stared at myself, the silence of the room peeled away, and I was dragged back to the moment this masquerade began. Not the moment under the bridge, but the moment before that. The moment I died the first time. It was 5 years ago. I was 27. I was working late in the archives of Vanguard Realty, digitizing old blueprints. I had stumbled upon a folder marked Harrington Heights, Phase 1. It was a low-income housing project my parents had built on the south side. They had received massive tax breaks from the city for revitalizing the community. I looked at the material procurement logs. Then, I looked at the structural engineering requirements. The math didn't add up. I ran the numbers 3 times. I remembered the feeling of bile rising in my throat. The concrete density listed in the paid invoices was 40% lower than the safety standard required for a 12-story residential building. They had cut the cement with fly ash and sand to save $2 million. $2 million. That was the price of human lives. I remembered storming into my father's study. It was raining that night, too. Thunder was shaking the windows of the Lake Forest mansion. Robert was sitting by the fire, swirling a glass of scotch. Cynthia was reading a fashion magazine. I threw the file on the desk. You are building coffins, I had shouted. If there is a minor earthquake or even high winds, that foundation will shear. People will die. Robert didn't even blink. He looked at the file, then at me. It is up to code, Anthony. The inspector signed off on it. You bought the inspector, I screamed. I am going to the city council. I am going to the press. I am not letting you kill people for profit. Robert stood up then. He didn't yell. He smiled. It was a sad, disappointed smile. "Sit down, son, have a drink. You are hysterical. You have been working too hard." He poured me a glass of scotch. I refused it. He insisted. "Just one drink to calm your nerves, and then we will look at the numbers together. If you are right, we will fix it, I promise." I believed him. That was my sin. I believed that my father was a man capable of shame. I took the drink. I took one sip. The next thing I remembered was waking up in my apartment with police officers shouting, dragging me out of bed. They found 3 ounces of cocaine in my nightstand. They found a needle in my arm, a needle I had never touched. The medical report said I was in a drug-induced psychosis. My parents stood in the hallway, weeping fake tears for the neighbors to see. "We tried to help him," Cynthia had sobbed. "He is sick." They didn't just kick me out. They discredited me so thoroughly that if I ever spoke about the concrete, it would sound like the ravings of a junkie. They stole my life to protect their $2 million. I blinked, shattering the memory. I was back in the penthouse. The anger was no longer a hot fire. It was a cold, hard block of ice in my chest. "You look handsome," I turned. Bella was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a long, emerald green gown that matched her eyes. She looked regal, but her hands were twisting nervously in front of her. "I look like them," I said, turning back to the mirror. "I look like a fraud." Bella walked over and stood beside me. She reached up and straightened my tie, her touch gentle. "You look like a warrior putting on armor," she corrected. She looked at my reflection, then met my eyes in the glass. "Anthony, are you sure about this?" "We have gone over the plan, Bella. The trap is set." "That is not what I mean," she said softly. "I mean, do you feel it? The sadness. They are monsters, I know. But they are still the people who raised us. Tonight, we are going to destroy them. We are going to put them in prison. Does that hurt you?" I looked at her. I thought about the question. I searched my heart for a pang of guilt, a flicker of hesitation. I looked for the little boy who used to want his father's approval. I found nothing. "Family isn't blood, Bella," I said, my voice steady. "Family is the people who catch you when you fall. You are my family. Silas, the old man under the bridge who shared his last half of a sandwich with me when I had a fever, he is my family." I turned around to face her directly. "Robert and Cynthia Harrington are not parents," I said. "They are merchants. They buy and sell things. They sold their integrity for a mansion. They sold the safety of poor families for a tax break. And 5 years ago, they sold me for silence." I took Bella's hands. "They went bankrupt a long time ago, Bella. Morally bankrupt. Tonight isn't a tragedy. It is a liquidation sale." Bella let out a breath, her shoulders relaxing. She squeezed my hands. "Okay, then let us go close the deal." My phone buzzed on the dresser. The screen lit up with a picture I hadn't changed, a generic silhouette. But the name flashed. Father. I picked it up. "Hello, Robert." "It is Dad tonight, Anthony." Robert's voice barked through the speaker. He sounded tense, the false warmth of yesterday, replaced by the sharp edge of a commander maneuvering troops. "We are 10 minutes away from the venue. The press is already set up in the lobby. There are cameras everywhere." "I am ready," I said. "Listen to me," he hissed. "Sterling has the papers. You stick to the script. You go up there, you smile, you shake my hand, and you say that you are grateful for the opportunity to reinvest in the family legacy. Do not improvise. Do not try to be funny. And for God's sake, don't twitch. If you look crazy, the stock drops." "I won't embarrass you," I said, staring at the city lights. "You better not," he threatened. "Remember, Anthony, this is your one chance at redemption. You mess this up and you are back on the street. And this time Bella won't be able to save you." "I understand," I said. "We will see you in 20 minutes. Don't be late." The line went dead. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't ask how I was. He just issued orders. I put the phone down. He is afraid, I told Bella. He sounds aggressive, but he is terrified. He should be, Bella said. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a secure message notification. A black icon with a green lock. It was Marcus. I opened the message. There was no text, just an image of a progress bar at 100%, and a file attachment named Pandora.zip. Then a second message popped up. Marcus. I am in. I mirrored the main server at Vanguard HQ, while Robert was logging in from his phone to check your wallet. The malware on his device gave me the admin handshake. I typed back. What did you find? The typing bubbles appeared dancing for a moment. Marcus. Everything, boss. It is worse than we thought. They are not just laundering money for the South Loop project. I found a ledger going back 20 years. They have been washing cash for the cartel since you were in middle school. The Consulting Partners LLC in the Caymans. It connects to accounts in Sinaloa and Moscow. This isn't just fraud. This is RICO territory. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew my parents were corrupt. I didn't know they were international criminals. Marcus. I also found the structural reports for the current buildings. The ones people are living in right now. Anthony, the safety rating is negative. If the wind speed hits 60 miles an hour, the shear walls in the North Tower could fail. There are 300 families living there. My hand tightened around the phone until the metal dug into my palm. 300 families. Living in a death trap built by my parents to fund their lifestyle. Anthony. Did you send it? Marcus. The package is queued. The FBI, the SEC, and the Chicago Tribune. I set the timer for 8:30 like you asked. Once you sign that paper, the blast doors open. Anthony. Good work, Marcus. Go dark. I slipped the phone into the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket. It sat against my heart, heavy and hot. I walked over to the desk, where my leather briefcase lay open. Inside was a single thin folder. It was labeled Digital Asset Transfer Protocols. Inside were the keys to the fake crypto wallet and the merger agreement Marcus and I had doctored. It was the bait. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. I ran my finger over the leather. It felt substantial, real, just like the lie I was about to tell. I snapped the briefcase shut. The sound echoed in the empty penthouse like a gunshot. Let's go, I said. We took the private elevator down to the garage. The chauffeur Bella had hired, a silent ex-military type named Davis, was waiting by the open door of a silver sedan. No Rolls-Royce tonight. We wanted to look humble. As the car pulled out onto the street, the city of Chicago unfolded before me. It was a beautiful, cruel city. The skyscrapers pierced the low-hanging clouds, glowing with amber and white light. The snow was falling harder now, swirling in the wind, coating the streets in a pristine white sheet that hid the dirt and the cracks. I looked out the window as we crossed the river. I looked down at the dark water. Somewhere down there under the concrete overpass of Wacker Drive was the spot where I had nearly died 3 nights ago. I could almost see the ghost of my former self, huddled in the cardboard box, shivering, blowing on frozen hands. I wasn't doing this for the money. I wasn't even doing it for revenge, not really. Revenge is petty. Revenge is for the past. This was for the future. I thought about the families in the North Tower. Mothers cooking dinner in kitchens that could collapse. Fathers tucking children into beds that were supported by cut-rate concrete. They didn't know that their lives were lines on a ledger in my father's office, balanced against the cost of a new yacht. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of the leather seats. "Are you okay?" Bella asked, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "I am fine," I said, opening my eyes. The wolf was awake, the wolf was hungry, and the wolf was ready to hunt. "I am just thinking about the speech," I lied. "What are you going to say?" I looked at the briefcase on my lap. "I am going to tell them the truth," I said. I am going to tell them exactly who Anthony Jones is. The car turned onto Monroe Street. The awning of the Palmer House Hilton was ahead, bathed in floodlights. A crowd of photographers was already gathered behind velvet ropes, their breath steaming in the cold air. "Showtime," Bella whispered. I fixed a smile on my face. It was a perfect plastic smile, the smile of a dutiful son. "Showtime," I repeated. I opened the door and stepped out into the flashing lights, the grand ballroom of the Palmer House. Hilton smelled of lilies, expensive gin, and old money. It was a suffocating sweet scent that coated the back of my throat the moment I stepped through the double mahogany doors. The ceiling, a masterpiece of 21 frescoes, soared 50 feet above us, adorned with brass chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. Below, the creme de la creme of Chicago society swirled in a kaleidoscope of silk, velvet, and diamonds, moving to the soft, anesthetized strains of a string quartet, playing a classical cover of a pop song I didn't recognize. It was a beautiful, shimmering Shark Tank. I paused at the top of the short staircase that led down to the dance floor. Bella stood beside me, her hand gripping my arm tight enough to bruise. She looked stunning in her emerald gown, but I could feel the tremor in her fingers. "Breathe," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "It is just a play. And we have the best seats." "I hate them," she murmured, scanning the crowd. "Look at them, smiling, drinking. Half of them know Dad is insolvent, and the other half are hoping he is so they can buy his assets for pennies." "Let us go disappoint them," I said. We descended the stairs. The moment my foot touched the plush carpet of the ballroom floor, the flashbulbs erupted. It was a blinding staccato of white light, disorienting and aggressive. I blinked, forcing my eyes to adjust, and fixed the plastic smile on my face. "Anthony! Anthony, over here! Mr. Harrington, is it true you have been in Vienna? Anthony, look this way!" My parents materialized out of the crowd like conjured spirits. Robert was beaming, his face flushed with adrenaline and perhaps a bit too much scotch. He clamped a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that looked possessive to the cameras, but felt like a vice grip to me. "Here he is," Robert announced, his voice booming over the chatter. "The prodigal son returns. Ladies and gentlemen, my son Anthony." The crowd parted. People I hadn't seen in 5 years. People who had stepped over me in the street, people who had ignored my emails when I was begging for a job, now rushed forward with outstretched hands and wide, predatory grins. "Anthony, my boy!" It was Mr. Henderson, the vice president of the bank that held the $50 million note. He was a portly man with a face like a bulldog. "You look fantastic. Europe treated you well, I see. We heard you were doing architectural research." "Where was it?" "Prague." I looked at Robert. He had woven a tapestry of lies so thick it was suffocating. "Vienna, Prague, anywhere but Wacker Drive." "It was an educational trip," I said, my voice smooth and polite. "I learned a lot about structural integrity and how things collapse." Robert laughed, a loud, nervous bark. "Always the philosopher, my Anthony." "Yes, yes. He took some time to find himself, and now he is back to help lead the family into the next century." Cynthia glided up on my other side, linking her arm through mine. She was wearing a diamond necklace that I knew was insured for $200,000. I wondered if she had paid the premium this month. "Doesn't he look dashing?" she cooed to a group of socialites who were eyeing me like a piece of prime steak. "We missed him so terribly. But you know how artists are. They need their space." I looked at the women. I recognized one, Mrs. Vanderbilt. She had once called the police on me because I was sitting on a park bench near her townhouse, trying to catch my breath after walking 10 miles. She had called me a menace. Now she was looking at me as if I were a prize stallion. "It is so brave of you to return," Mrs. Vanderbilt said, fluttering her eyelashes. and to bring such a substantial contribution to the firm. We have all heard the rumors. Crypto, how modern! It is just a little hobby, I said, playing the humble fool. I got lucky. Luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, Robert interjected, steering me away from the women and toward a circle of men in dark suits. These were the partners, the investors, the men whose money Robert had squandered. Gentlemen, Robert said, his chest puffing out, I would like you to meet the new senior technical advisor of Vanguard Realty, my son Anthony. The men nodded, assessing me. Their eyes didn't look at my face. They looked at my suit, my watch, my shoes. They were calculating my net worth in real time. Anthony said a man named Sterling, not the lawyer, but a distant cousin, a hedge fund manager with eyes like chips of flint. Your father tells us you are liquidating a significant position to shore up the capital reserves. That is a bold move in this market. Bitcoin is volatile. Volatility is where the value is, I recited, using a line I had read in a magazine. But I believe in brick and mortar. I believe in the Harrington legacy. Hear, hear, Robert said, raising his glass. Although, I continued, locking eyes with the hedge fund manager, I was looking at the quarterly reports for the South Loop project last night. I was a bit concerned about the liquidity ratio. It seems the short-term debt obligations are outpacing the projected cash flow by nearly 300%. How are we hedging against the rising interest rates on those variable bonds? The smile on Robert's face vanished. The hedge fund manager raised an eyebrow, surprised. That is a technical detail, Robert stammered, his grip on my shoulder tightening painfully. We have it under control. Creative accounting, right, Sterling? Actually, I pressed, keeping my voice innocent but loud enough for the circle to hear. It looked like the debt service coverage ratio was below 1.0. That usually triggers a default clause with the primary lender. Unless, of course, the asset valuations were adjusted, the circle went quiet. These men were sharks. They understood the language of blood. I had just cut my father and let a drop fall into the water. Anthony has been away for a while, Robert said, his voice tight, his eyes promising murder later. He is still catching up on the nuances of our strategy. The books are solid, rock solid. In fact, that is why we are here tonight, to demonstrate just how solid we are. He physically turned me away from the group, guiding me toward the front of the room. Shut up, he hissed in my ear, smiling at a photographer as he did so. One more word about ratios and I will have security drag you out the back door. I was just trying to sound smart, Dad, I whispered back. Like you said, just smile and sign the damn paper, he growled. We reached the stage. It was a raised platform draped in blue velvet with a podium and a long antique table. On the table sat a single document bound in leather and a gold pen. Behind the table was a massive LED screen displaying the Vanguard Realty logo, a golden lion. Robert stepped up to the podium. He tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the ballroom, silencing the chatter. The string quartet faded out. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert began, his voice taking on that rich baritone quality that had charmed investors for 30 years. Thank you for joining us on this momentous evening. He paused for effect, looking out over the sea of expectant faces. For the past few decades, Vanguard Realty has been a pillar of Chicago's skyline. We have built homes. We have built dreams. But even the strongest pillars need reinforcement. He gestured to me. I was standing a few feet behind him with Bella and Cynthia. I felt like a prop in a school play. Tonight, we are not just celebrating a financial milestone. We are celebrating the return of my son, Anthony, a brilliant mind, a visionary. He has returned from his travels with a commitment to the future of this family. He clapped his hands, and the screen behind him changed. The golden lion was replaced by a graphic, a stylized digital coin merging with a building. It was tacky, but the crowd oohed and ah-ed. Anthony has graciously agreed to merge his personal digital assets, valued at over $15 million, into the Vanguard portfolio. This capital injection will not only clear our current obligations, but will launch Phase 2 of the Harrington Heights development. Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, measured applause. They weren't clapping for me. They were clapping because they thought they were going to get paid. "Anthony," Robert said, turning to me and extending his hand. "Come join me." I walked to the podium. The lights were hot on my face. I looked down at the crowd. I saw the greed. I saw the envy. I saw the emptiness. And in the back of the room near the exit, I saw a waiter checking his watch. It was 8:25. 5 minutes. "Thank you, Father," I said into the microphone. My voice did not shake. "It is good to be home." "Let us make it official," Robert said, eager to skip the speeches and get to the ink. We moved to the table. Jonathan Sterling, the lawyer, was standing there. He looked like an undertaker. He opened the leather folder and smoothed out the document. "The agreement of merger and assumption of assets," Sterling announced. "Please sign on the indicated line, Mr. Jones." I looked at the document. It was thick, dense with legal jargon. I knew exactly what was in it because Marcus and I had written it. On page 4, buried in a paragraph about fiduciary responsibilities, was the poison pill clause that made Robert personally liable for the non-existent funds. I looked at Robert. He wasn't reading it. He was looking at the audience, smiling, waving. He was so arrogant, so sure of his victory, that he couldn't be bothered to read the contract that would end his life. "Read it, Dad," I offered, holding the pen. "You always told me to read the fine print." "I have read it," he lied, loud enough for the front row to hear. "It is standard. Sign it, Anthony." I hesitated. This was the moment, the point of no return. Once I put pen to paper, the trap would spring. The malware on Robert's phone would trigger the bank transfer attempts. The void signature would legally nullify the asset transfer. But crucially, the attempt to transfer would trigger the liability clause we had inserted. I held the pen over the paper. My hand trembled. I looked up at Cynthia. She was standing right behind me. She leaned down, pretending to adjust my collar for the cameras. Her perfume was overpowering. "Do it," she whispered, her voice a hiss of pure venom that only I could hear. "Sign fast, you useless piece of trash, and then you can crawl back to whatever rat hole you came from. We got what we wanted." I froze. The words hung in the air between us. Useless piece of trash. That was it. That was the closure I didn't know I needed. There was no love left. There was no misunderstanding. There was only malice. I looked at her. I smiled. It wasn't the plastic smile anymore. It was a genuine smile, a smile of absolute liberation. "As you wish, Mother," I said aloud. I lowered the pen. I did not sign Anthony Harrington. I did not sign Anthony Jones. I pressed the nib of the gold pen into the paper. With large, sweeping, stylized loops that looked like a flamboyant signature from a distance, I wrote, "VOID, FRAUD, DETECTED. I added a flourish at the end, a long underscore that looked like an underline but was actually striking through the signature line itself. I stood up. "It is done," I said. Robert didn't even look at the signature. He snatched the paper from the table before the ink was dry. He held it up high above his head like Moses, holding the tablets. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted into the microphone, "the future is secured." The ballroom erupted. This time, the applause was thunderous. The champagne corks popped. The band struck up a triumphant fanfare. Robert was beaming, Cynthia was clapping, and Sterling was closing his briefcase, thinking he had just earned a $3 million commission. I stood there in the center of the noise, in the center of the light. I watched my father parading a piece of paper that said fraud on it to a room full of people he was trying to defraud. I looked at my watch. 8:30. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single vibration. Then the large LED screen behind us, the one displaying the golden lion, flickered. It wasn't a glitch. The image of the lion distorted, pixelated, and then vanished. The screen went black for a second. The music faltered as the audio system hiccuped. The crowd quieted down, confused murmurings rippling through the room. "What is going on?" Robert asked, looking back at the screen. Sterling fixed the screen. Then a new image appeared. It wasn't a graphic, it was a document, a PDF. It was blown up to 20 feet tall. The text was crystal clear. Internal memorandum. Vanguard Realty from Robert Harrington. To Site Foreman. Subject: concrete mixture, South Loop direct. Quote: dilute the mixture by 40%. We need to shave $2 million off the foundation costs. Pay off the inspector if he asks questions. Just get it done. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of 300 people holding their breath at once. Robert froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off! It is a hack! It is fake!" But the screen changed again. This time, it was a bank transfer record. Sender: Vanguard Realty recipient. Consulting Partners, LLC, Cayman Islands. Memo: SEC audit. Suppression fee, amount: $3 million. Gasps erupted from the crowd. I saw Mr. Henderson, the banker, drop his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Cynthia!" Robert yelled, grabbing the podium. "Do something!" Cynthia was paralyzed. She was staring at the screen, her face draining of all color. I stepped forward to the microphone. Robert tried to push me away, but I stood my ground. I was younger, stronger, and I wasn't afraid anymore. "It is not a hack," I said. My voice was calm, amplified across the silent room. I looked at the crowd. "And it is not fake. The only fake thing in this room is the check my father is holding." Robert looked at the paper in his hand. He finally looked at the signature. He squinted. He read the words: "Void. Fraud detected." He looked up at me, his eyes bulging with a mixture of terror and madness. "You," he whispered, "you rat." "No, father," I said, loud enough for the back row to hear. "I am the architect, and I just condemned this building." Then the doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. They didn't open for guests. They opened for men in blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI. And behind them, the flashbulbs of the press were no longer polite. They were hungry. They were blinding. And they were coming for him. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton transformed from a sanctuary of high society into a gladiatorial arena in the span of 3 heartbeats. The moment Robert raised that fraudulent document above his head, claiming victory, the air in the room shifted. He had barely finished shouting about the secured capital when the massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the golden lion of Vanguard Realty, dissolved into digital static. It wasn't a subtle flicker. It was a violent, jarring tear in the reality they had constructed. A high-pitched feedback screech ripped through the speaker system, causing 300 people to cover their ears simultaneously. The string quartet stopped playing. The waiters froze, trays of champagne tilting precariously in their hands. Then, the static cleared, replaced by the truth. It started as a trickle of data, then a flood. Marcus was not just showing a single email. He was broadcasting the entire autopsy of the Harrington Empire. A complex animated flowchart appeared on the 20-foot screen, tracing the flow of money. Red lines shot out from the Vanguard corporate accounts like arterial spray routing through shell companies in Panama, then bouncing to the Cayman Islands, and finally landing in the pockets of local zoning inspectors and offshore consultants. The crowd gasped, a collective sound of shock that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. "What is this?" Robert screamed, spinning around to face the screen. "Who is doing this? Cut the feed! Cut the power!" He waved frantically at the audio-visual technicians in the booth at the back of the room. I saw them frantically pushing buttons, slamming faders down, yanking cables. But nothing happened. Marcus had locked the system at the kernel level. The screen was no longer controlled by the hotel. It was controlled by the righteous anger of a ghost. A new document popped up overlaid on the flowchart. It was a structural engineering report for the North Tower, dated 3 years ago. The text was highlighted in neon yellow. Shear wall integrity failed. Risk of catastrophic collapse in high wind events. Critical. Recommendation: immediate condemnation. Below it was a handwritten note in my father's distinct, jagged script. Bury this. Get a new engineer. "Oh my God!" a woman in the front row whispered. It was Mrs. Vanderbilt. Her hand flew to her throat. "My niece lives in that building." The mood in the room curdled instantly. These people were greedy, yes, but they were not murderers. The realization that they were sipping champagne with a man who had knowingly put hundreds of lives at risk turned their admiration into revulsion. The circle of investors who had been fawning over Robert just moments ago began to back away, creating a wide, empty circle around the stage. Robert looked at them, his eyes wild. "It is a lie. It is a deep fake. My son is doing this. He is sick." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "He is off his medication. He is trying to destroy the family." Cynthia rushed forward, grabbing the microphone stand, her face a mask of panicked fury. "Please, everyone, listen to me. Anthony has a history of paranoid delusions. He has hacked the system. None of this is real." I stepped forward. I didn't need to shout. The silence in the room was so profound that a whisper would have carried to the back exit. I reached out and gently took the microphone from my mother's grip. She tried to hold on, but I looked her in the eye. Really looked at her. And she flinched, letting go as if the metal were white-hot. I stood alone at the front of the stage. I looked at the investors. I looked at the press, whose cameras were now recording not a gala, but a crime scene. "The emails are real," I said, my voice steady, echoing off the frescoed ceiling. "The engineering reports are real. The bribery is real." I paused, letting the words land. "But there is one thing that is not real." I pointed to the document Robert was still clutching in his hand, the paper he thought was his salvation. "The $15 million, I said. "It does not exist. It never existed. There is no crypto wallet. There is no secret fortune. I am just a man who lived under a bridge for 5 years because these two people," I gestured to my parents, "chose a tax break over their own son." Robert went rigid. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse standing upright. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was no bailout. There was no safety net. He had just confessed his solvency, or lack thereof, to the entire world based on a phantom. "You," Robert choked out. The veins in his neck bulged. "You tricked me." "I tested you," I corrected. "And you failed. You were willing to take money you thought was stolen from the IRS to cover up a crime you committed against this city. You signed the liability clause, Robert. You personally guaranteed a fortune that is equal to 0. Which means the $50 million in debt. It is yours now. Personally. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry are all gone." A primal roar ripped from Robert's throat. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a beast whose leg had just snapped in a trap. He lunged. He didn't care about the cameras. He didn't care about the police. He wanted to kill me. He charged across the stage, hands curled into claws, aiming for my throat. "I will kill you!" he screamed. "You ungrateful little bastard." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched him come. 2 feet before he reached me, a massive shape stepped out from the shadows of the velvet curtains. It was Davis, the chauffeur Bella had hired. But Davis wasn't just a driver. He was ex-Special Forces. Davis moved with a speed that defied his size. He intercepted Robert mid-stride, grabbing his wrist with one hand and planting a flat palm on his chest with the other. Thud. Robert hit the floor hard. He scrambled to get up, spitting and cursing, but Davis simply placed a heavy boot on his chest, pinning him to the stage like an insect. "Stay down," Davis said, his voice calm and bored. Cynthia screamed, a long, piercing shriek that shattered the last remnants of dignity in the room. She rushed toward Robert, swinging her designer purse at Davis, hitting his arm ineffectively. "Get off him!" "Effie," she shrieked. "Do you know who we are? We are the Harringtons. We own this city." "Not anymore, ma'am," a loud voice boomed from the back of the room. The double doors at the main entrance burst open with a crash that shook the walls. 20 agents in blue windbreakers swarmed into the ballroom. On their backs, in bright yellow letters, were the words FBI. Flanking them were uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. The crowd screamed, and scattered people diving under tables or pressing themselves against the walls to get out of the way. The flashbulbs went nuclear, a strobe light effect that made the scene look like a disjointed nightmare. Leading the charge was a tall woman with a badge hanging from her neck. She marched straight down the center aisle, her eyes locked on the stage. "Robert Harrington! Cynthia Harrington!" she shouted, holding up a piece of paper. "I am Special Agent Miller with the FBI. You are under arrest." Sterling, the lawyer, tried to sneak away. He grabbed his briefcase and sidestepped toward the service exit. "Grab him too!" Agent Miller barked. 2 agents tackled Sterling before he could reach the door. His briefcase flew open, spilling the merger contracts. The evidence of the conspiracy, all over the floor. Agent Miller leaped onto the stage. She nodded to Davis, who stepped back. 2 agents hauled Robert to his feet. He was panting, his tuxedo disheveled, his eyes, darting around the room looking for an escape that didn't exist. "You are charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to bribe a federal official." Agent Miller read her voice, cutting through Cynthia's sobbing. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is a mistake," Robert sputtered, trying to pull his arms away as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "My son set me up. This is entrapment. He is the criminal. He hacked my phone." "We have the emails, mister." "The Harrington," Agent Miller said coldly. "We have the recordings. We have everything." She turned to Cynthia. "Mrs. Harrington, turn around." "No," Cynthia wailed, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a rosary. "I didn't do anything. I am just a wife. I didn't know." "We have your signature on the forged stock transfer documents for Biogen," Agent Miller said, spinning her around and cuffing her hands behind her back. "And we have the audio of you telling your husband to pay the bribe." The ballroom was a cacophony of shouting camera shutters and the crackle of police radios. But in the center of the storm, I felt a strange, hollow calm. It was over. The tower had fallen. As the agents began to drag them off the stage, Cynthia dug her heels into the carpet. She looked back at me, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. Her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it burned. "I gave you life," she screamed at me. "I gave you everything. You are a monster. You are sick, Anthony. You belong in a cage. You are crazy." The agents pulled her harder, but she kept screaming, thrashing like a wild animal. The press was eating it up, thrusting microphones into her face, capturing every ugly second of her meltdown. "Tell them!" she shrieked at the reporters. "Tell them my son is a lunatic. He belongs in an asylum." I watched her. I remembered the way she used to look at me when I was a child, with that same cold, appraising stare, deciding if I was worth the effort. I remembered the day the men in white coats came to my apartment, and she stood there dry-eyed, signing the paper that took away my freedom. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at her as the agents paused for a split second to adjust their grip. "I am not crazy, Mother," I said. My voice was low, but in the sudden lull, everyone heard it. I leaned in closer. "And I am not asleep anymore. I straightened up. I am finally awake. Cynthia let out a final incoherent wail as the agents dragged her down the stairs. Robert was weeping now, broken sobs that shook his entire body. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, defeated. They were marched through the gauntlet of the crowd. The same people who had shaken their hands 20 minutes ago now held up their phones, live streaming the disgrace to the world. The flashbulbs popped relentlessly, documenting every step of their downfall. I stood on the stage and watched until the doors swung shut behind them. The room began to empty. The police were cordoning off the area as a crime scene. The guests were being ushered out, whispering excitedly, already texting their friends about the scandal of the decade. Bella walked up to me. She was crying, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. She reached out and took my hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked at the empty spot on the floor where my father had been pinned. I looked at the screen, which was now black, the evidence collected by the FBI tech team. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of lilies and gin, but underneath it I could smell something else. The smell of rain. The smell of clean air. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I don't feel cold anymore." I looked at my hand. The hand that had signed void. It wasn't shaking. "Let's go, Bella," I said. "I want to get a burger, a real one." We walked down the stairs, leaving the wreckage of the Harrington dynasty behind us. The party was over. But for the first time in 5 years, my life was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since the night the sky fell on the Harrington Empire. The city of Chicago was finally thawing. The brutal gray sludge of February was giving way to the crisp, tentative sunshine of early March. The ice on Lake Michigan was cracking, breaking apart into jagged white islands that drifted slowly toward the horizon. I sat on a wooden bench in Millennium Park, a paper cup of coffee warming my hands. It was a good cup of coffee. Black, robust, and most importantly paid for with my own money. Not stolen, not begged, earned. Beside me, a newspaper lay open on the bench. The wind ruffled the pages, but the headline was still bold enough to read from 10 feet away. Harrington Fraud, a web of deceit unraveled. Below it was a photo of my parents being led out of the federal courthouse in orange jumpsuits. They looked smaller without their furs and bespoke suits. They looked like what they were, 2 frightened aging con artists who had finally run out of runway. The article detailed the seizure of their assets. The mansion in Lake Forest was already being prepped for auction. The offshore accounts had been frozen and were being repatriated to pay back the bank and the investors. The yacht, the cars, the art collection. All of it was being liquidated to cover the crater they had left in the earth. I took a sip of coffee and looked up. Bella was walking toward me across the grass, holding 2 pretzels. She wasn't wearing a power suit today. She was wearing jeans and a thick wool sweater, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She looked 5 years younger. The weight of the secret, the fear of the blackmail, it was all gone. "Mustard or plain?" she asked, sitting down next to me. "Mustard," I said, taking the pretzel. "Always mustard." We sat in silence for a while, just watching the city breathe. A group of children were chasing pigeons near the Cloudgate sculpture, their laughter bright and sharp in the cold air. A young couple walked by holding hands, arguing good-naturedly about where to eat lunch. For 5 years I had watched scenes like this from the shadows. I had been a spectator to life, a ghost haunting the edges of other people's happiness. Now I was part of the frame. I was just a man on a bench eating a pretzel with his sister. It felt like a miracle. "The lawyers called this morning," Bella said, brushing salt off her fingers. "The North Tower is being evacuated. The city inspectors confirmed your report. The foundation is unstable, but they think they can reinforce it without tearing it down. It will take a year, but the residents will be safe." "Good," I said. "That is good." "And the settlement fund?" she asked. "It is set up," I nodded. "I transferred the $3 million this morning. The new foundation's trust. It will pay for temporary housing for the displaced families and legal aid for anyone else, Robert and Cynthia cheated. Bella turned to look at me, her green eyes searching my face. You gave it all away, didn't you? The royalties. Everything. Not everything, I smiled. I kept enough for tuition and rent on a small studio apartment in Rogers Park. It has a radiator that clanks, but it is warm. You are really going back? She asked. To architecture school. I have 2 semesters left, I said. I want to finish what I started. Not to build skyscrapers for ego, but to build things that last. Places where people are safe. I think that is what I was meant to do before I got derailed. I reached into the pocket of my coat, a simple, sturdy wool coat I had bought at a thrift store. My fingers closed around the familiar tattered spine of the moleskin notebook. I pulled it out. The cover was barely holding on. The pages were swollen with water damage and stiff with grime. It smelled of mildew and the metallic tang of the underpass. It contained the Sentinel Code, yes, but it also contained the ravings of a desperate man. It contained the algorithms of my survival, the frantic calculations of calories and temperature that had kept me alive. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight. It was heavy. It was the anchor that had held me in the storm, but the storm was over. I stood up and walked over to a trash can near the path. Anthony, Bella called out softly. I hovered the notebook over the opening. For a second, I felt a pang of fear. This book had been my only friend. It had been the proof that I existed. But I didn't need proof anymore. I was here. I let it drop. It hit the bottom of the can with a dull thud. I turned around and walked back to the bench. I felt lighter, physically lighter. Why did you do that? Bella asked. Because I am not writing that story anymore, I said. I am starting a new chapter. Bella leaned back, looking up at the sky. It was a brilliant, piercing blue, the kind of blue that hurts your eyes if you stare too long. Do you hate them? She asked suddenly. I knew who she meant. I tried to, I said. For a long time, hate was the only fuel I had. It kept me warm when the cardboard wasn't enough. I hated them for the lies, for the betrayal, for the years they stole. I looked at the newspaper again, at the picture of my mother hiding her face from the cameras. But now, I shook my head. I just feel nothing. They are just people who made terrible choices. They built a prison of greed around themselves, and now they are living in a real one. I don't need to hate them. Justice has been served. Do you regret it? Bella pressed. Sending them to jail? They are well. They are our parents. I looked at her. I looked at the fierce, loyal woman who had spent 5 years searching for a brother everyone said was dead, who had risked her company, her reputation, and her safety to pull me out of the darkness. I said the words coming to me clearly. Family isn't DNA. Family isn't a last name or a shared inheritance. I reached out and took her hand. Family is the person who stopped the car, I said. Family is the person who wasn't afraid to hug a dirty-smelling stranger because she saw the brother underneath. Family is the person who pulled me out from under that bridge. Bella's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. She squeezed my hand tight. I would do it again, she whispered. In a heartbeat. I know, I said. And that is why we are going to be okay. We sat there for a long time until the coffee was cold and the sun began to dip behind the skyline. The shadows of the buildings stretched long across the park, but they didn't look menacing anymore. They just looked like shade. Come on, I said, standing up and brushing the crumbs from my lap. I have a class at 6. Structural Dynamics 101. I don't want to be late on my first day. Bella laughed, standing up with me. You are going to be the oldest student in the class. I prefer most experienced, I grinned. I have practical field knowledge of thermal insulation properties of cardboard. We began to walk toward the exit of the park, merging into the flow of commuters heading home. I watched the people around me, businessmen in suits, students with backpacks, tourists taking selfies. 5 years ago, I walked among them invisible. I was a stain on the pavement. Now I was just a man with a sister, a future, and a warm coat. I took a deep breath of the cold air. It tasted like freedom. As we walked away, the wind picked up the newspaper from the bench, tumbling it across the grass. The image of the Harringtons in handcuffs rolled away, getting smaller and smaller, until it was lost among the leaves. I didn't look back. Money can buy a penthouse. It can buy a yacht. It can buy a senator. But the courage to cut the rope, to let go of the toxicity that drowns you, and to stand on your own 2 feet, that price is priceless. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Calm Revenge stories like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.